Welcome everyone to today's Allegiance Group and Pursuant webinar. If this is your first time joining us for a webinar, we're ecstatic to see you. And if you're returning, we're so happy that we earned another visit from you. Before we get into the meat of today's conversation, I would love to just walk through a few housekeeping slides. But before I do, sorry about that. Before I do, just want to make sure that we're all in the same place where we should be. So today we're going to be discussing smarter segmentation, stronger fundraising. Our friends Matthew and David are going to be walking us through what that means and how you can evolve in your segmentation journey. So with that, we'll get into the few housekeeping slides we have. Today's presentation is being recorded, so if you have to drop early or if you happen to join late, we are recording it and we will be sharing it in your inbox within the next 24 hours, so you can look for that in your inbox, as well as some additional resources tomorrow. And then I'd love to just share a little bit more about Allegiance Group and Pursuant. Again, if it's your first time joining us, or if perhaps you've joined us for a Pursuant webinar in the past. A couple of years ago, we merged with this awesome company called Allegiance Group, and we are able to offer a wide range of services due to that combining of forces that you can see listed here, which includes online giving, digital fundraising and marketing, web strategy, design and development, direct response, mail and print, loyalty and incentives technology, our GivingDNA software, a CRM that's targeted at the public media space, and a wide variety of advertising services. So that describes, I think, pretty well our offerings and our expertise. So hoping that you'll be able to take something away that's valuable to you today. And then we also serve nonprofits in the following sectors. So again, just highlighting our expertise in an organization that hopefully looks like the one that you are joining from today. And then if you haven't heard me on a webinar or a podcast, I'm Leah Fadling. I serve as our Director of Content Marketing. Before I introduce Matthew and David to you, I have a question. I would love to know about you. So if you would just take a few moments, I'm going to launch a poll here and just answer with the role that best describes yours. And I will launch that right now. And then while we're waiting for those responses today, Matthew, any initial thoughts as people are jumping on the poll?
I'm excited to figure out what the spread is here.
Yes. Keep this open for a few more seconds. Looks like we've got just about everybody participating.
I'm hoping for a mix. We'll see where we land.
Yes. Yes.
If everyone answers other, then we're going to have clarifying
My
polls.
responses weren't exhaustive, clearly.
Yes. All right. I'm going to end the poll here. Surprise, 42% did answer other.
Okay, cool.
Which we would love to know. I'm not sure actually if we have the webinar chat fully engaged, but we do have the Q&A engaged. So if you answered other just sometime today, feel free to pop in your title in the Q&A because we really would love to be able to tailor today's presentation to the pain points that you're walking in with. But we can see about a quarter of folks are director of development. About 8% would describe themselves a donor relations manager. We've got a handful of marketing and communications folks in the room, as well as some people who work in the CRM and with data. All right, we've got a director of philanthropic engagement in the chat.
Cool.
So awesome. Yeah, keep that. We've got an annual giving officer, executive director, development coordinator, director of research, annual fund program manager, CEO, president, a few other titles. But anyway, definitely keep your title coming. We're very interested to know more about you. But with that, I'm going to hand things off to David, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and the work that you do here at AGP.
Hi, thanks, Leah. My name is David Sacchetti. I'm an associate VP for Client Strategy here at Allegiance Group and Pursuant. And I work with our clients on developing their fundraising programs, particularly direct response fundraising, both mail and digital, as well as phone and paid social and all things social media. I've got about 20 plus years of experience in the nonprofit space. I started my career out at another agency, working with some large national nonprofit organizations, and then moved to the client side and spent a little bit over a decade in your shoes on the client side, working at a nonprofit. And then about 7 years ago, came back to the agency side with Allegiance Group and Pursuant. So I'm really happy to be here today to talk about segmentation. This is a really passionate topic for me, and I think something that's critical for the success for nonprofits and fundraising, particularly as we see the advancements in technology and how individuals are coming to the expectations that they would be listened to, heard, and spoken to from the organizations they interact with in a customized manner. So I'll turn it over to Matthew.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Leah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Matthew Mielcarek. I lead our analytics and insights team at Allegiance Group Pursuant. And so part of that team includes our audience strategy services. That's really a team of specialists who are focused on segmentation strategy, omni-channel audience development, and personalization. And so fortunately, those are all of the topics that we are going to be talking about today. I've been with Allegiance Group Pursuant for about 7 or 8 years. I've been working with and serving nonprofit organizations for about 20. David, if you'll remember, about 20 years ago is actually when we met. Of course, we were in kindergarten at that point, working on a client meeting in Boston at the time. So it's great to be here with you and be your coworker and share the stage to share what we know. I wanted to briefly talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So you are at the Smarter Segmentation, Stronger Fundraising webinar today. And really what we want to talk about today is segmentation, why it's important. We'll spend the most of our time together on a framework that Allegiance Group Pursuant has developed to differentiate between different phases of segmentation maturity. So we hope that it gives you both an ability to report on your own performance and where you are within your own program, but then also give you a roadmap for becoming more sophisticated and gleaning greater results from your program. So again, thanks for being here. We'll wrap with some tools that will allow you to do that, to assess and categorize where you are today, and then give you some direction on how to advance your program. So I really want to kick off with a little bit of the why related to segmentation. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir in terms of the folks who are here who are interested in segmentation based on your role descriptions that you shared in the survey earlier together. I don't need to rationalize or justify this to you, but I think it's important to remind folks why segmentation is important. We are all direct response marketers, and we're trying to drive response. We're trying to drive action for those who are ready to take it. And so we like to say that segmentation is really that heart of direct response and the heart of what we do. Why is that? Well, first of all, it enhances donor and customer experience. So if we are attempting to deliver personal engagement and to make our communication personal, segmentation is the way to get there. It fosters stronger relationships and loyalty. It shows us that an organization knows who I am. It reflects my interests. And if it's successful, it gets me in a mindset of being eager to hear from the organization again, to receive an email or a piece of direct mail, to open that letter and read deeper and welcome them back again. That's pretty ambitious, but segmentation is the way that we get there. Secondly, everyone has finite resources, regardless of the size of their organization, from the biggest to the smallest nonprofit. And segmentation really helps us to maximize those resources, either by focusing on donors with the highest potential or by eliminating wasted spend on those low engagement segments. And then also, I would say that segmentation really ensures relevance. So, direct response marketing relies on delivering the right message to the right audience at that time. And without segmentation, outreach becomes generic, it's not compelling. It reduces engagement and conversion rates overall. And so, just a few key reasons there. I also wanted to share some realities really about the industry landscape of where we're in just with this slide alone. But I would say, frankly, that these are pressures that many direct marketers are feeling on a daily basis. At the left, these are giving participation rates by household over the last 10 years. And this is from the Lilly School. It really only goes up to 2020, so it's actually a little bit before that. And sorry, it's hard to read. The middle bar, that secular bar, is the one that we are most interested in. And what this tells us is that 15 years ago, half of American households were giving to philanthropy each year. And now, 10 years later, only one third are giving, only one third are participating. So the takeaway here is that fewer households are receptive to philanthropic messages. That's a pretty grim story, a pretty grim reality. 10 years is a very short period of time for that level of decline. At right, a number that many of you are familiar with. This is average nonprofit donor retention rates, and it's really 45%. It's painfully low. I think most of us are painfully aware of this metric as well. What this means is most of us are losing over half of our donors year after year. So at times, our individual giving programs are feeling like sieves with donors flowing out at a faster rate than they can be added. Both of these, a little bit daunting, are really a call to action for smarter segmentation, for data-driven insights and recommendations around our programs so that we can focus our energy and resources on the audiences that are most likely to welcome us, who are mission driven and really who are interested in changing the world. And so I believe that we can do that with smarter segmentation strategies.
And I'm going to jump in here and talk a little bit about, segmentation in terms of, driving results, or is it really mass messaging in disguise? How many of you are confident that your organization is using segmentation effectively? If you don't know, you're not alone there. Many nonprofits still rely on those, broad, overarching messages, kind of the one size fits all approach, leading to a lot of missed opportunities and donor fatigue. And so today, we're going to walk through a proven roadmap that's going to help you to assess where you're at in your segmentation journey and show you how you can kind of level up your strategy to the next level. And so on the next slide, we call this the segmentation maturity framework. It's really a fancy name for a four-stage categorization of the sophistication of segmentation. It outlines the approach and the data requirements and how to get there, and then some of the opportunities that with implementing segmentation at each of those four stages. And we hope that, it will allow you to, look at where you're at with your organization and implement some techniques and some strategies in the short term to have an impact on your communications with your donors and constituents, and then have a more longer term roadmap or an aspirational look to how to advance and grow your segmentation in the future for a lot of the different groups of donors that you engage with. And so this really enhances the donor and customer experience. So that personalized engagement helps to foster stronger connections and relationships with the organization, which leads to brand loyalty. When individuals receive communications that reflect their interests and giving behaviors, they feel more valued and are more likely to take action. Segmentation really helps with resource efficiency as well, focusing on high potential donors or targeted groups of constituents allows organizations to optimize their budget and efforts and sort of avoid wasted spend on lower engaged segments while prioritizing those most likely to respond. And we'll have a few examples that we'll talk about a little bit later as we walk through the framework. And I think segmentation ensures relevance. Direct response relies a lot on delivering the right message to the right audience at the right time. And without that, the outreach becomes more generic and less compelling, and leading to reduced engagement and conversion rates.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks, David. So here it is. This is the framework that we've developed. I don't know the number of clients that David and I have touched, particularly at the onboarding stage. But it is many, it is vast, and in many cases, we have seen, almost everything. And so I would share that this is really a culmination of that experience of having the privilege to work with a new organization, learn more about them and their program, and then determine where on this continuum do they fit? How can we bring strategies to them that help them to grow their program and drive greater results? And so I'd share that again, we're happy to bring these learnings to you based on that multitude of clients that we've worked on through each of our experience. Another thing that is important about this framework is that we like to think of it as progressive and gated. And what we mean by that is that each phase really sets the foundation for the next. So organizations should really seek to drive as much value as they can from each stage before investing too much in building the next. And I would say in other cases, we've seen organizations focus really intently on stage 3, but perhaps they're missing some of the basics from stage 1. And so what we really mean by this is focus on each, maximize results that you can as you advance. We will share the characteristics of each stage in detail, as well as a few case studies from that experience and that work that we've done. But I do want to provide an overview too of each of these stages. So that first one we call foundational. It's really often baseline targeting of key groups of interests. So it's a step above that mass messaging that David mentioned. I would say maybe 80% of the organizations that we start working with might be focused right there. And that's okay because there's room to grow. Stage two takes things a little bit further, and it is behavioral and demographic enrichment. And so, what we mean there is it relies on additional data related to behaviors and profiles of folks that are within your database. Stage three invokes predictive analytics. And while we're aiming for predictive elements really at every stage related to your segmentation, this is really where advanced models and individual scoring and indexes come into play, where we have the ability to rank and index every member of our house file on their likelihood to respond. And then lastly, that stage four is bleeding edge real time, the bleeding edge real time stage. And what we mean here is completely personalized one-on-one journeys that a constituent might take with us based on their interaction. So in this case, this targeting is not at all calendar based, but is instead based on who you are and what you've just done. So I'm interested to figure out where you guys are, and so we want to go into a little more detail on each of these. For each, I'll reiterate what our focus is. David will share a little bit on examples of the clients we've touched to bring them to life. And then I'll share up at the right a bit on data requirements. So what are some of the baseline data elements that you need to have in place, along with tools to really unlock the pure value that you need at each stage? I would also share that we have all of this detail available in a download, and we'll talk about what that looks like at the end of this and how you can reach that. So again, stage one, basic segmentation. Remember, this is a step above mass marketing. We've termed it basic segmentation or foundational. Here we're targeting really those broad donor groups. David, tell us a little bit about your clients who have fit this profile and then the type of segmentation you've performed.
Yeah. So with this stage, I mean, at sort of, I consider this to be table stakes almost at this point, right? So all of our clients are operating certainly at this level, and it's taking your mass market file and organizing it into an RFM sort of structure, right? Where we're looking at donor recency, frequency, and monetary value to look at the file in terms of where your organization sort of is landing in terms of the makeup of your file, which can help to really drive strategy. So, for example, if a lot of your donors are lower dollar donors, or maybe you have donors that give at a higher frequency, they like to give, quarterly or monthly, or you have a large group of donors that we would consider to be lapsed in their giving at 13 months or plus. So this allows us to sort the file into these different segments and these different groups, which can drive the communications that we are providing to them and speak to them in a more customized manner. So, subtle nuances in language, for example, to donors that might be giving $100 or more, using transformational type language or more valued supporter type of language, to more renewal oriented language for some lapsed donors. You know, we sometimes fall into the trap that, we think our donors think of themselves as current or lapsed, or but no, they don't think of themselves that way, right? And they may not even realize that a year has gone by since they've given a gift to your organization. And so those subtle nuances in copy, driven by this segmentation approach, really helps to create a more customized experience for that donor. And then also with different groups within your file are also, a way to kind of level set this baseline or segmentation. So they're digital only donors versus direct mail only versus multi-channel donors. Those approaches are really good to kind of communicate with donors through the channels in which they have interacted with the organization in the past. So it allows for us to kind of put in that sort of baseline segmentation, and then making some determination around pushing certain groups of donors into different programs. So, analyzing if lapsed donors should be put into an acquisition program instead of on the renewal side, testing direct response messaging and to audiences that are not traditionally direct response oriented, like event names or digital, trying to drive that multi-channel donor growth. So that is really kind of the baseline level of segmentation that we do for all of our clients.
Awesome. Yeah, so to get started, what do you need up there at the top right? Really having command of your historic giving data is what is vital here. This is going to give you insight into your most recent gifts, your gift frequency, those giving amounts as well. We've called out that donor acquisition date, and knowing how recent that first gift was made can be really vital in segmenting your file. I also just wanted to share a key tool that might be in use here. And, David mentioned table stakes, a CRM, and the ability to organize those donors and those transactions is really fundamental to segmentation. If we don't have an ability to organize, then we don't have the ability to sort through and analyze. And so we'd say the CRM really takes the cake there in terms of those baseline activities. Let's go ahead and move on to stage 2 now. So stage 2, again, we're terming it intermediate segmentation. This is really where we take a step further by folding in behavioral and demographic data to the transaction data that we talked about at that previous stage. It's really taking profiles of individuals that you know and telling you more about all of those individuals. David, will you share how you've used this in the past?
Yeah, so this is the stage that I get most excited about right now, because this is where a lot of our clients are at, and this is where we are really leaning into this sort of next stage of segmentation and really beginning to customize experiences for different constituent groups. So building on that sort of existing segmentation from stage one, we look to affinity or causes to the mission. So connection to the disease or to the mission, affinity for advocacy, doing that deeper dive into the traditional recency, frequency, and monetary segments. Like, for example, isolating prior campaign responders into their own segment and speaking to them in that manner through those communications is making a real difference in terms of their response rate. I have one organization that I work with where we isolate prior campaign responders and speak to them in that way through the communications. And their response rate is doubled over the average current donor response rate. Taking a look at, example like $100 plus donors who might receive a different package or a different postage treatment, possibly with like a live stamp return on the return envelope, speaking to them and segmenting them into these groups helps to drive more of an experience tailored for them at their level. Another area that we are really focused on with our clients is through welcome packages, online and offline both, gathering data about donor preferences, motivations, and affinities. So, but it's not just gathering that data, it's taking that data and doing something with that data. I can't tell you how many times we've all fallen into this trap of doing surveys and collecting information, and then we do it and we kind of check the box off, and then that info goes and sits on a shelf somewhere, right? So this is really taking that information and then serving up content to them based on their preferences, interests, and what they're really looking for from the organization. And then another aspect to this stage, which is really fun and exciting from a segmentation perspective, is leveraging our GivingDNA platform. So looking to this tool to identify prospects for either upgrading, leveraging a proposal package or other techniques to drive donors up into that sort of mid-level gift range of $1,000 or more. I also have a great example where we looked to leverage that tool to identify planned giving prospects and then customize those communications to generate leads for planned giving. We had an organization that was mailing upwards of 50 to 60,000 with planned giving content. And it was leveraging a very broad-based strategy, sort of what I would call spray and pray a little bit. And we leveraged the GivingDNA tool to really narrow down that audience for planned giving prospects, and ended up mailing about 6,000 instead of the 50,000. And what we saw was a stronger response rate and a healthy and qualified group of leads that came out for the planned giving officer to follow up on. So that one I love because it's such a good example of how segmentation in a more thoughtful and smart manner can save money for your organization.
Yeah, I love David. You hit on this a little bit, but the grateful patient programs for health-related organizations, I think that that's a really good example of activating at stage two because it makes use of prior historic data if an individual has given. Then it folds in additional first-party data that an organization may have about its customers. So you have visited, for instance, a health-related facility. And so it's matching those things up and giving us additional insight. And then the third-party demographic data that you mentioned, the enrichment, can give us other demographic insights that might predict, their response to an appeal, like do they live in the region where the facility exists, or maybe were they traveling? Are they older? Do they have higher affluence or ability to give as well? And so all of those data elements coupled together can create some really strong segments in segmentation and allow us to target those groups smarter. The tool, David shared this, and this is an example from GivingDNA. The thing I like to stress about this is really easy in terms of the way that this works. Users upload a transaction file and a donor file, kind of the example that I just shared. You could also upload that list of your customers or former patients, for instance, as well. And then instantly, as they are uploaded, that data augmentation occurs. And what I mean by that is individuals are bumped up against a broad US consumer database of, I think, 300 million individuals. And all of a sudden, donor profiles emerge based on demographic criteria that we shared. And so just by simply uploading data, you now have the ability to segment on many of those demographic attributes and elements so that you can come to the segmentation you see here at the left. And so these are built-in segments over at the left, and I'll just read through them. We've got a lapse risk. So people who look like they might be lapsing, sustainer candidates. So high frequency donors who are candidates for a sustainer program, upgrade candidates as well as our lapsed donors. So built-in opportunity segments that make use of historic giving information as well as demographic. And again, I'd reiterate, really easy at this level. And so I think that's why we get excited about folks who are at that stage two with us.
And Matthew, if I could chime in,
Sure.
that when you mentioned the lapse risk, that prompted me for another good example that I wanted to share which is, you know, we tend to think of our donors as like current at 0 to 12 months and then lapsed, right, at 13 plus months. And segmenting donors into sort of some pre-lapsing categories. We did some testing with one of our clients where we looked at changing up the messaging at that sort of 8 to 12 month range. So they hadn't given a gift in 8 months plus, right? To before they moved into full lapsed territory at 13 plus months. And so we did some segmentation to with those donors to implement kind of a stronger pre-lapsing sort of copy and tactics to engage them. And when we did that, we saw, that the retention rate, shot up by 5%
Oh, wow.
for that group. And so that's such a great example of how segmentation can really help to drive engagement and keep donors engaged with the organization.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we are getting more sophisticated with stage three. David, if you like stage two, I'm gonna be the cheerleader for stage three.
Yeah.
I like this a lot. I would say, and just to be blunt, fewer of our clients are at this stage, and certainly even fewer are at stage four. In some cases, these are aspirational. It's where we're working with organizations who are trying to take command of their data to get to this point. But in this case, at stage three, what we're doing is really forecasting donor behavior with greater precision using predictive modeling. And so here we're talking about things like using AI and machine learning to build custom models to score every individual within a list, within a file, with an index or a rating on their likelihood to upgrade, to make a mid-level gift, to become a planned donor. In many cases, these are often custom models because they are trained on your own data, on your past solicitations, on your past responses, on your past performance, and on your historics. And so that's also where the precision comes from. And I think that is really important. An additional tool that we use to get here, and I'll share a little bit up ahead, is based on mindset as well. And so we use an approach called cluster analysis to look at a complete donor file, to organize files into 3 to 5 clusters overall, to describe them, to understand what their unique motivations are, and then to engage and speak with them based on what those findings are. This one is more advanced, so those historic giving patterns are really important. Engagement metrics all of a sudden become important as well. So who's opening email? How are they interacting with social media? Which direct mail pieces did they receive? Versus which did they respond to as well. And so this is taking a lot of data, not just the response data, but solicitations, looking at that historic performance, and then creating a model that tells us for future folks that we might target what their likelihood to respond is. David, not sure, do you have examples?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew is absolutely right. Like that this at this stage, we don't have a lot of clients that are operating here. I can share 2 examples. The first one is this is being used effectively from an acquisition standpoint. So for our clients that have very large mail programs for acquisition, with large pools of lapsed donors to fish in and limited resources, we can leverage, machine learning and modeling to help us to target the right lapsed donors, to target the right new donor prospects to include in our acquisition mailing efforts. So that's one place that I think it's being used effectively. The other example that I would give is sort of connected to giving and giving patterns and the leveraging the customized giving history of a donor. We tend to group our ask arrays for direct response based on their highest previous contribution. or their most recent contribution, and then build out an array that is, has maybe a low, mid, and a high ask with it. And that usually multiplies by 1.5 or multiplies by 2. And we can customize gift arrays by the individual based on their giving history and their giving patterns. So, do they give a larger gift at a certain time of the year? What was the frequency of their giving? What type of gifts have they been giving? And then serve up sort of a customized ask for them based on their specific and nuanced giving history. And that's something that can be done both digitally and through the mail. But, again, very much something that's not widely adopted yet at this point.
Yep. Yeah. I wanted to show an example of that mindset cluster model that I mentioned earlier. This is for a hypothetical organization. And the way to think about it is if you have a house file of 100,000 donors, typically those individuals have arrived into your database and came to your organization through different sources. But those sources don't always completely define or describe who those individuals are, what they look like, or really what their connection to your organization is. And so this approach through mindset segmentation seeks to create a model of your overall donor house file and describe those individuals based on their mission connection and based on their connection to your organization. And so, in this particular framework, from left to right, we have folks who are most connected, who have higher value, who are taking greater actions, versus those who are in the file at the far right, who are the least connected and perhaps uninvolved. And so over at the left, we described that group as aligned families. It turned out they were younger than folks on the file. They're at a younger life stage, typically with kids at home. They've fundraised. So that's not specifically related to the dollars they've given themselves, but they're very active in that they've taken action. And they've done so because they've been personally impacted. If you scroll all the way to the right, we have two disengaged or uninvolved groups. One's disengaged Gen Zers, and other one's uninvolved seniors. And again, these are all custom. Those disengaged Gen Zers, they work full time, but they don't give. They're not very philanthropic. They have lower household incomes. And when they do, they help the less fortunate or when there's a crisis within the local community. The gist here and the goal is that we're trying to organize a file based on connection and engagement. And in doing so, in taking these mindset segmentations and applying them to targeting, we have some degree, some idea of the type of response that we'll likely get. Um, and I would share that there are many other models related to acquisition, reactivation, pre-lapsing that can be custom designed for different organizations as well. So really excited about those. And lastly, we want to close out on stage 4, definitely the most aspirational. We call it integrated real-time optimization, or even further, bleeding edge. And again, this is about hyper personalization. If you think of a new donor series as an example, most of you have that. But what we're referring to here is really omni-channel triggering across all channels, orchestrated often by a customer data platform or customer data management platform, or even marketing automation platforms that really take the responsibility for deploying messages away from the calendar and instead link that to interactions and engagements that an individual has taken so that that messaging is truly dynamic depending on what that individual just did or what they have last done. So I would say that there is quite a lot of strategy that is required to put in place to activate this type of real-time segmentation. There's quite a lot of technology that's typically required as well to keep track of and trigger a lot of this automation. I've got to believe, and I'm seeing in the marketplace that AI-related tools are going to support this more to where that segmentation and those models could be managed by a black box and both identified and triggered at the right point. So that will get really interesting as well. And so wanted to share this. And then I think one of the fundamental tools, and many of you have maybe gone through these processes before, but to get there, one definitely needs to start with journey mapping or experience mapping of your constituents to identify what is that experience that we want them to go through. The vision that I described on the prior slide was really about automating the entire relationship, the entire life cycle. Again, this might just start with new donors who have the lowest loyalty and retention to hold on to them. But really what we're talking about is mapping the goals of our supporters at every phase of their relationship with us, understanding where we are delighting or disappointing them, and then really creating touch points from an omni-channel perspective. So in the mail, through web advertising, through targeted emails that are triggered based on actions and responses, leveraging affinity and interest information to then target an individual with that elusive right message at the right time. And so as David and I mentioned, we have very few organizations who are operating at this level right now, but certainly they are, this is a vision and aspiration that they're seeking, and they're picking off single journeys at a time, often by exploring what they might look like and then automating those as well. So with that, we just want to wrap with some closing comments related to assessment. And so I wonder if you're able to figure out where you operate right now and where you want to go based on that framework. For the organizations that we work with, as you start your own assessment, it really starts with measurement and with analytics on your program. And really, any information that you can glean by segment is key or important. So, can you look at life cycle? New donors versus second year and long-term donors, and explore what your retention rates are for those individuals. Can you segment your file in the same way and then look at average gift? Can you look at your appeals and look at those response rates by segment? And as you do so, build in some granularity, for instance, about the length of time that a donor's been on your file, and look at the performance of where it persists the deeper you go on your file versus where it really drops off. And doing so is really a great start for understanding how your program is performing and perhaps where to draw the line on targeting within your file. I would share if you need help, our analytics team is killer. So we're happy to dig into your donor and campaign data and help you to answer some of those questions overall. I really want to leave folks again with the framework overall. And then I will turn it over to Leah to share just a little bit about some additional resources that we have and to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Matthew and
Sure.
David. We've had a lot of great activity in the chat and the Q&A, so I'm excited to dive into some of those questions here in a second. But like Matthew shared, we have packaged up the information from this webinar into a handy 3 to 4 page guide for you to kind of walk through and do a self-assessment, as well as some recommended next steps depending on where you fall in that framework. And so you can grab that at that QR code, and then we will also include a link to that in the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow. And then we also have an additional resource, which is our donor journey workbook. This was also put together by Matthew and his team, and it goes more in depth on the topic of donor journey mapping, which is also a great exercise to go through if you have a few segments within your database that you feel could be optimized with a better experience, and this kind of helps get you there. All right, I think we now have time for a few questions before we wrap up with kind of a final call to action. And actually, Matthew, if you'd like to jump to that final slide, I want to make sure
Oh,
folks
sure.
are able to see that in case they have to go ahead and jump off. But looking through the questions, let's see. There's some great ones in here. I think I'm going to jump to the first one from Mary, who asks, what might be some differences in messaging for a donor 8 to 12 months post-gift versus recently lapsed or several years lapsed? Big general question, but maybe David, you could help with this.
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the messaging that we sort of modulate as donors get into that sort of pre-lapsing territory, that like 8 to 12 month range, are more impact driven. So we share more information related to how their support is really making a difference. We also employ some gift reminder tactics. So there may be like a specific mention of, we thank you so much for your gift in XYZ time period, just like a gentle reminder for donors for the last time that they gave. We also can leverage some anniversary language. So, hey, you're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of your gift, and we value and appreciate you so much. And then as we move into the sort of lapsed territory, in terms of more recently lapsed, like 13 to 24 months, we're just talking about renewing their giving and reasons why they should give and why it's important to give now. We also infuse a little bit of language around what I call like we miss you language. So we haven't heard from you in a while, and we want you to know how valued and appreciated you are, like that kind of language.
Thank you, David. I really love this question as well. This came in about halfway through from someone anonymous, which I hope that we can learn who you are so that we can follow up with you. But the question is, what are some criteria considered that indicate someone might be a great candidate for an upgrade?
I'll take that one, even though that it's too easy for David. So I'll try to take a stab at this one. But we're basically looking at giving behavior against others on the file, and we're looking for individuals whose gift frequency increases, but also the gift amount has been increasing from a steady perspective. So often just looking at that relationship of giving acceleration and growth. And then there could also be elements of their affinity and capacity to give. So if we know that they're giving to other higher amounts to other organizations, that's also very telling because we know that they're being philanthropic elsewhere. And so for our organization, we might believe that they can upgrade for us as well.
And I think I actually have something to add there too. And I'm just kind of speaking from more personal anecdotal experience, but there's an organization that I've been giving $10 to for probably 10 years now. And it's a very small organization. But it comes out of like PayPal auto withdrawal. And every single time I get this question, I always think of, I really wish that organization, because I've been giving for 10 years, would send me an email saying, hey, do you want to up your gift? Because it
Just a
made
little
it
more.
easy for me to
Yeah.
do. I totally would. All right. And then one more question that I thought was really interesting. This one's from Kelly, which was how can social media interactions integrate with the CRM to meet kind of the data requirement? That's also probably a in-depth question, but maybe there's a few ways we can point this person.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one because there's so much data and interactions online. So it entirely depends on your CRM. And I would say that there is a continuum of digital first CRMs or digital play well with digital
Yeah.
CRMs from the examples that we shared earlier. So that's going to play a big role is starting with how digitally friendly your CRM might be and then how easy it is to align with those interactions. So it entirely depends. I do think it's probably a lower, um, a lower impact integration or requirement that one might have overall, but definitely can be insightful about engagement.
Excellent. Well, we are just a minute past the hour. As a reminder, I saw a few questions in the chat. We'll be sending the recording, the slides, as well as some links to the resources that we shared today in that email. So take a look, keep a lookout for that in your inbox tomorrow. And of course, you can reach out to us via sales@teamallegiance.com if there's any services that you're interested in learning more about, especially if you have some questions about your file and would love us to take a look under the hood. So with that, I think we can wrap up today. David and Matthew, thank you so much for putting this together. I think our attendees got a lot of value out of it.
Thank y'all all for attending. Thanks,
Thank
Leah.
you so
Thanks,
much,
David.
everyone.
Bye.